Rene Descartes was a creative mathematician of the first order, an important scientific thinker, and an original metaphysician during the course of his life. He was a mathematician first, a natural scientist or natural philosopher second, and a metaphysician third. In mathematics, he developed a technique that made possible algebraic or analytic geometry. In natural philosophy, he can be credited with several specific achievements: co-framer of the sign law of refraction, developer of an important empirical account of the rainbow, and proposer of naturalistic account of the formation of the earth and planets. More importantly, he offered a new vision of the natural world that continues to shape our thoughts today, a world of matter possessing a few fundamental properties in interacting according to a few universal law. This natural world included an immaterial mind that in human beings was directly related to the brain. In this way, Descartes formulated the modern version of the mind body problem. In metaphysics, he provided arguments and existence of God to show that the essence of matter is extension and that the essence of mind is thought. Descartes claimed early on to possess a special method which was variously exhibited in mathematics, natural philosophy, and metaphysics, and which, in the latter part of his life, included or was supplemented by a method of doubt. Descartes presented his results in major works published during his time: the Discourse of the Method, with its essays The Dioptrics, Meteorology, and Geometry; the Meditation on the First Philosophy, with its objections and replies; the Principle of Philosophy, covering his metaphysics and much of his natural philosophy; and The Passion of Soul, on the emotions. Important works published posthumously included his letters, World or Treatise on Light, containing the core of his natural philosophy; Treatise on Man, containing his physiology and mechanistic psychology and rules of the direction of the mind; an early unfinished work attempting to set out his method. Descartes was known among the learned in his day as a top mathematician, as the developer of a new comprehensive physics or theory of nature, including the living things, as the proposer of new metaphysics. In the years following his death, his natural philosophy was widely taught and discussed. In the 18th century, aspects of his science remained influential, especially his physiology, and did his project of investigating the knower in assessing the possibility and extent of human knowledge. He was also remembered for his failed metaphysics and his use of skeptical arguments for doubting. In 19th century, he was revered for his mechanistic physiology and theory that animal bodies are machines, that is, are constituted by material mechanisms governed by the laws of matter alone. The 20th century variously celebrated his famous cogito starting point, reviled the sense data that some alleged to be the legacy of his skeptical starting point, and looked to him as a model of culturally engaged philosopher. He has been seen at various times as a hero and as a villain, as a brilliant theorist who set new directions in thought, and as a harbinger of a cold, rationalistic, and calculative conception of human beings. If we look over to this side, we can see the intellectual revolutions and society. What is the intellectual revolutions all about? Rene Descartes' use of logic. He insisted that everything in the natural world can be proven by reason. Next, how did the revolution advance modern science and scientific thinking at the time? Because of discoveries and proven methods of Rene Descartes in the field of mathematics, natural philosophy, And most importantly, he offered the new perception of the world that to this day is still used. Who are the figures in the revolution? There were not many people involved in the revolution aside from his immediate family and some random meetings of former acquaintances because Rene Descartes was, as he said, to live well, you must live unseen. At some point, he kept moving from one place to another 24 times in order to keep ahead of spies and government agents. He also once said that you don't need expensive tools or lab, and all you need is a quiet place and your rationality. And on this slide, we can see what controversies met the revolution. But before I proceed, I just want to share with you a book that I found titled The Irrationalist, The Tragic Murder of Rene Descartes by Andrew Plessing. It is a very interesting book, though I haven't read it yet, but the synopsis says Rene Descartes was 53, penniless, and living in exile in Amsterdam alone, with much trepidation but not much of a choice. He arrived in Stockholm in mid-October, shortly after he died. And the cause of death was said to be pneumonia. But who would believe, right? There was just too many people or people of interest that wants to see Descartes dead. Firstly, because of his books, controversial books that he published, and he was known for a very fierce revolutionist that backs his ideas with logic by reason, while other philosophers backs their ideas or discoveries by with God as the backbone. So if you're interested, I'll just leave the link on the last slide of this presentation. And okay, let's go back. So first, the meditation on on first philosophy. This is a very short work attempt to provide foundation for all knowledge. It is also the source of famous quote, I think, therefore I am. The only problem is that Descartes never says precisely this. Worse, the argument expressed by that quote was originally made by St. Augustine 13 centuries earlier. Second, replies to objections to meditations. The meditations were published along with objections written by the leading thinkers of the day, as well as Descartes' replies to those objections. The objections and replies ended up being far longer than the original text, proving once again that in philosophy, concision is a vice. Next, the principles of philosophy. Descartes hoped to get into a textbook business by writing an introductory text for adoption by the Catholic universities of his day. This might have worked too had it not been for the fact that much of what he was teaching was taught to contradict Catholic philosophy, leading to accusation that he was an atheist and a heretic. And fourth, the world. In this book, Descartes attempted to explain quite literally everything there was to explain. One thing he explained was how the earth moved around the sun and not the other way around. When it was explained to him that the church had just punished Galileo for teaching the very same thing, Descartes quickly pulled his book from the publisher. And fifth, passion of the soul. Descartes was famous for being rationalist, one who stresses the significance of reason. In this book, though, he reflected on the nature of emotions by attempting to explain them in terms of physical body. Ever the cheerful one, for example, he described laughter as occurring when blood comes from the right side cavity of the heart through the arterial vein and suddenly and repeatedly inflates the lungs, forcing the air in them to rush out through the windpipe, where it makes an inarticulate, explosive sound. So you can see it's quite literal, and as I said earlier, the significance of reason. Next slide, we can see how has the contribution of the key figure impacted society in general. What are the practical applications today of the key figure's contribution to science? Rene Descartes impacted the field of science and math. He developed the techniques in analytic geometry, such as Cartesian plane. In in science, he can be credited with several specific achievements, such as the co-frame of sine law of reflection and the developer of an important empirical account of a rainbow and the proposer of naturalistic account of the formation of the Earth and planets. And the major thing he developed is a new vision of the world. What I mean here is that this Earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around. So at that time, it was not widely accepted because it was contradicting to the church beliefs.